everyone, good evening. Sorry I'm a tad late. I clearly lost track of time. My name is Saman Giraud and I'm your host for this evening. Welcome to you to Readings in Isolation. All right. Thank you, Joanna. You know what for. So, Joanna left off at The Porter and the Three Ladies of Baghdad, which turns to be a quite sexual story. It is about a porter who's being picked up by a beautiful woman who lets him carry all kinds of errands she's running, from luxurious perfumes to flowers to meat to groceries of all kinds. And once they reach her house, he sees two more women who are just as beautiful, if not even more beautiful than her. And once they pay him and dismiss him, he doesn't want to leave because he wants to stay. So he stays and offers his entertainment. And they start drinking wine all night long until they start a game. And one of the ladies gets undressed, completely naked, hops into the basin, comes out and asks the porter, "What would you call this article?" And by that article, she meant her vagina or vulva. So he comes up with these kinds of names for it: vulva, vagina, clitoris, and she keeps saying no, and she gets so angry at him that she starts beating him until she tells him that she calls it the basil of the britches. Now the second woman also hops into the basin, also naked, comes out asking him the same question: "What would you call this article?" And he thinks that he's outsmarting them and says basil of the britches, but he's wrong. So she starts beating him even harder until she tells him that she calls it the husked sesame seed. Now the third lady, who's apparently the most beautiful of all, does the same thing again, gets naked, hops into the basin, comes out and asks the poor porter, "What would you call this article?" And he starts all over again, saying every single name he ever heard of. And she just beats the crap out of him. And this is where we stopped. "Oh, my sisters, and what is its name?" She replied, "It is entitled The Khan of Abu Mansur." Whereupon the porter replied, "Ha ha! O Allah be praised for safe deliverance, O Khan of Abu Mansur." Then she came forth and dressed, and the cup went round a full hour. At last the porter rose up, and stripping off all his clothes, jumped into the tank and swam about and washed under his bearded chin and armpits, even as they had done. Then he came out and threw himself into the first lady's lap and rested his arms upon the lap of the portress and reposed his legs in the lap of the cateress and pointed to his prickle and said, "Oh, my mistress, what is the name of this article?" All laughed at his words till they fell on their backs, and one said, "Thy pintle." But he replied, "No," and gave each one of them a bite by way of 4 feet. Then said they, "Thy pizzle?" But he cried no, and gave each of them a hug. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased saying her permitted say. Now when it was the 10th night, quoth her sister Dunyazad, "Finish for us thy story." And she answered, "With joy and goodly gree. It has reached me, O auspicious king, that the damsel stinted not, saying to the porter, 'Thy prickle, thy pintle, thy pizzle.' And he ceased not kissing and biting and hugging until his heart was satisfied. And they laughed on till they could no more. At last one said, "O our brother, what then is it called?" quoth he. Know ye not? Quoth they, No. Its veritable name, said he, is mule burst all, which browseth on the basel of the bridges, and muncheth the husked sesame, and nighteth in the Khan of Abu Mansur. Then laughed they till they fell on their backs, and returned to the carousal, and ceased not to be after this fashion till night began to fall. Thereupon said they to the porter, Bismillah, O our master, up and on with those sorry old shoes of thine, and turn thy face, and show us the bread of thy shoulders. Said he, By Allah, to part with my soul would be easier for me than departing from you. Come, let us join night today, and tomorrow morning we will each wend our own way. My life on you, said the procuratrix. Suffer him to tarry us, that we may laugh at him. We may live out our lives and never meet with his like, for surely he's a right merry rogue and a witty. So they said, Thou must not remain with us this night, save on condition that thou submit to our commands, and that whatso thou seest, thou ask no questions thereanent, nor inquire of the cause. All right, rejoined he, and they said, Go read the writing over the door. So he rose and went to the entrance, and there found written in letters of gold wash, Whoso speaketh of what concerneth him not, shall hear what pleaseth him not. The porter said, Be ye witnesses against me, that I will not speak on whatso concerneth me not. Then the cateress rose, and set food before them, and they ate, after which they changed the drinking place for another, and she lighted the lamps and candles, and burned ambergris and aloes wood, and set on fresh fruit and the wine service, when they fell to carousing and talking of their lovers. And they ceased not to eat and drink and chat, nibbling dry fruits and laughing and playing tricks for the space of a full hour, when lo, a knock was heard at the gate. The knocking in no wise disturbed the seance, but one of them rose and went to see what it was, and presently returned, saying, Truly our pleasure for this night is to be perfect. How is that? Asked they. And she answered, At the gate be 3 Persian calendars, with their beards and heads and eyebrows shaven, and all 3 blind of the left eye, which is surely a strange chance. They are foreigners from the Room land, with the mark of travel plain upon them. They have just entered Baghdad, this being their first visit to our city. And the cause of their knocking at our door is simply because they cannot find a lodging. Indeed, one of them said to me, Haply the owner of this mansion will let us have the key of his stable, or some old outhouse, wherein we may pass the night. For evening had surprised them, and being strangers in the land, they knew none who would give them shelter. And oh, my sisters, each of them is a figure of fun after his own fashion, and if we let them in, we shall have matter to make sport of. She gave not over persuading them till they said to her, Let them in, and make thou the usual condition with them, that they speak not of what concerneth them not, lest they hear what pleaseth them not. So she rejoiced, and going to the door, presently returned with the 3 monoculars, whose beards and moustaches were clean shaven. They salaamed and stood afar off by way of respect. But the three ladies rose up to them and welcomed them and wished them joy of their safe arrival and made them sit down. The Calenders looked at the room and saw that it was a pleasant place, clean swept and garnished with flowers, and the lamps were burning and the smoke of perfumes was spiring in the air. And beside the dessert and fruit and wine, there were three fair girls who might be maidens. So they exclaimed with one voice, "By Allah, 'tis good." Then they turned to the porter and saw that he was a merry-faced wight, albeit he was by no means sober and was sore after his slappings. So they thought that he was one of themselves and said, "A mendicant like us, whether Arab or foreigner." But when the porter heard these words, he rose up and fixing his eyes fiercely upon them said, "Sit ye here without exceeding in talk. Have you not read what is writ over the door? Surely, it befitteth not fellows who come to us like paupers to wag your tongue at us." "We crave thy pardon, O Fakir," rejoined they, "and our heads are between thy hands." The ladies laughed consumedly at the squabble, and making peace between the Calenders and the porter, seated the new guests before meat, and they ate. Then they sat together, and the portress served them with drink. And as the cup went round merrily, quoth the porter to the askers, "And you, O brothers of mine, have ye no story or rare adventure to amuse us withal?" Now the warmth of wine having mounted to their heads, they called for musical instruments. And the portress brought them a tambourine of Mosul, and a lute of Iraq, and a Persian harp, and each mendicant took one and tuned it, this the tambourine, and those the lute and the harp, and struck up a merry tune, while the ladies sang so lustily that there was a great noise. And whilst they were carrying on, behold, someone knocked at the gate, and the portress went to see what was the matter there. Now the cause of that knocking, O king, quoth Shahrazad, was this. The Caliph, Harun al-Rashid, had gone forth from the palace, as was his wont now and then, to solace himself in the city that night, and to see and hear what new thing was stirring. He was in merchant's gear, and he was attended by Jafar, his vizier, and by Masrur, his sworder of vengeance. As they walked about the city, their way led them towards the house of the three ladies, where they heard the loud noise of musical instruments, and singing and merriment. So quoth the Caliph to Jafar, "I long to enter this house, and hear those songs, and see who sing them." Quoth Jafar, "O Prince of the Faithful, these folk are surely drunken with wine, and I fear some mischief betide us if we get amongst them." "There is no help but that I go in there," replied the Caliph, "and I desire thee to contrive some pretext for our appearing among them." Jafar replied, "I hear and I obey," and knocked at the door, whereupon the portress came out and opened. Then Jafar came forward, and kissing the ground before her said, "O my lady, we be merchants from Tiberias town. We arrived at Baghdad 10 days ago, and alighting at the merchants' caravanserai, we sold all our merchandise. Now a certain trader invited us to an entertainment this night. So we went to his house, and he set food before us, and we ate. Then we sat at wine, and was sailed with him for an hour or so, when he gave us leave to depart. And we went out from him in the shadow of the night, and being strangers, we could not find our way back to our Khan. So happy of your kindness and courtesy, you will suffer us to tarry with you this night, and heaven will reward you. The portress looked upon them, and seeing them dressed like merchants, and men of grave looks and solid, she returned to her sisters and repeated to them Ja'far's story. And they took compassion upon the strangers and said to her, "Let them enter." She opened the door to them, when said they to her, "Have we thy leave to come in?" "Come in," quoth she. And the Caliph entered, followed by Ja'far and Masrur. And when the girls saw them, they stood up to them in respect, and made them sit down and look to their wands, saying, "Welcome, and welcome and good cheer to the guests, but with one condition." "What is that?" asked they. And one of the ladies answered, "Speak not of what concerneth you not, lest ye hear what pleaseth you not." "Even so," said they, and sat down to the wine and drank deep. Presently the Caliph looked on the 3 Qalandars, and seeing them each and every blind of the left eye, wondered at the sight. Then he gazed upon the girls, and he was startled, and he marveled with exceeding marvel at their beauty and loveliness. They continued to carouse and to converse, and said to the Caliph, "Drink." But he replied, "I am vowed to pilgrimage," and drew back from the wine. Thereupon the portress rose, and spreading before him a tablecloth worked with gold, set thereon a porcelain bowl, into which she poured willow flower water with a lump of snow and a spoonful of sugar candy. The Caliph thanked her and said in himself, "By Allah, I will recompense her tomorrow for the kind deed she has done." The others again addressed themselves to conversing and carousing, and when the wine got the better of them, the eldest lady, who ruled the house, rose, and making obeisance to them, took the cateress by the hand and said, "Rise, O my sister, and let us do what is our devoir." Both answered, "Even so." Then the portress stood up and proceeded to remove the table service and the remnants of the banquet, cleared the middle of the saloon. Then she made the Qalandars sit upon a sofa at the side of the estrade, and seated the Caliph, Ja'far and Masrur on the other side of the saloon, after which she called the porter and said, "How scant is thy courtesy! Now thou art no stranger, nay, thou art one of the household." So he stood up, and tightening his waistcloth, asked, "What would ye I do?" And she answered, "Stand in thy place." Then the procuratrix rose and set in the midst of the saloon a low chair, and opening a closet, cried to the porter, "Come help me." So he went to help her, and saw 2 black bitches with chains round their necks, and she said to him, "Take hold of them." And he took them and led them into the middle of the saloon. Then the lady of the house arose and tucked up her sleeves above her wrists, and seizing a scourge, said to the porter, "Bring forward one of the bitches." He brought her forward, dragging her by the chain, while the bitch wept and shook her head at the lady, who, however, came down upon her with blows of the scones, and the bitch howled, and the lady ceased not beating her till her forearm failed her. Then, casting the scourge from her hand, she pressed the bitch to her bosom, and wiping away her tears with her hands, kissed her head. Then said she to the porter, "Take her away and bring me the second." And when he brought her, she did with her as she had done with the first. Now the heart of the Caliph was touched at these cruel doings. His chest straightened, and he lost all patience in his desire to know why the two bitches were so beaten. He threw a wink at Ja'far, wishing him to ask, but the minister, turning towards him, said by signs, "Be silent." Then quoth the portress to the mistress of the house, "O my lady, arise and go to thy place, that I in turn may do my devoir." She answered, "Even so," and taking her seat upon the couch of juniper wood, ornamented with gold and silver, said to the portress and cateress, "Now do ye what ye have to do." Thereupon the portress sat upon a low seat by the couch side, but the procuratrix, entering a closet, brought out of it a bag of satin with green fringes and 2 tassels of gold. She stood up before the lady of the house, and shaking the bag, drew out from it a lute, which she tuned by tightening its pegs. And when it was in perfect order, she began to sing these quatrains. Ye are the wish, the aim of me, and when, O love, thy sight I see, the heavenly mansion openeth, but hell I see when lost thy sight. From thee comes madness, nor the less comes highest joy, comes ecstasy. Nor in my love for thee I fear, or shame and blame, or hate and spite. When love was throned within my heart, I rent the veil of modesty, and stints not love to rend that veil, garring disgrace on grace to alight. The robe of sickness then I donned, but rent to rags was secrecy. Wherefore my love and longing heart proclaim your high supremest might. The teardrop railing adown my cheek telleth my tale of ignominy, and all the hid was seen by all, and all my riddle read aright. Heal then my malady, for thou art malady and remedy, but she whose cure is in thy hand shall never be free of bane and blight. Burn me those eyne that radiance rain, slay me the swords of fantasy. How many hath the sword of love laid low the high degree despite? Yet will I never cease to pine, nor to oblivion will I flee. Love is my health, my faith, my joy, public and private, wrong or right, or happy eyes that sight thy charms, that gaze upon thee at their guise. Yea, of my purest wish and will, the slave of love, I'll aye be hide. When the damsel heard this elegy in quatrains, she cried out, "Alas, alas," and fell to the ground, fainting. And the Caliph saw scars of the palmwood on her back, and welts of the whip, and marvelled with exceeding wonder. Then the portress arose, and sprinkled water on her, and brought her a fresh and very fine dress, and put it on her. But when the company beheld these doings, their minds were troubled, for they had no inkling of the case, nor knew the story thereof. So the Caliph said to Ja'far, "Didst thou not see the scars upon the damsel's body? I cannot keep silence or be at rest till I learn the truth of her condition, and the story of this other maiden, and the secret of the two black bitches. But Jafar answered, O our Lord, they made it a condition with us that we speak not of what concerneth us not, lest we come to hear what pleaseth us not. Then said the portress, By Allah, O my sister, come to me and complete this service for me. Replied the procuratrix, with joy and goodly gree. So she took the lute and leaned it against her breast, and swept the strings with her fingertips, and began singing. Give back mine eyes their sleep long ravished, and say me whither be my reason fled. I learned that lending to thy love a place, sleep to mine eyes, mortal foe was made. They said, We held thee righteous who waylaid thy soul, go ask his glorious eyes. I said, I pardon all my blood he pleased to spill, owning his troubles drove him blood to shed. On my mind's mirror sun-like sheen he cast, whose keen reflection fire in vitals bred. Waters of life let Allah waste at will, suffice my wage those lips of dewy red. And thou address my love, thou find a cause for plaint and tears or ruth of lust yet. In water pure his form shall greet your eye, when fails the bowl, nor need ye drink of wine. After a pause she resumed, If we, plain of absence, what shall we say? Or if pain afflict us, where went our way? And I hire trudgemen to tell my tale, the lover's plaint is not told for pay. If I put on patience a lover's life, after loss of love will not last a day. Naught is left me now but regret, repine, and tears flooding cheeks for ever and aye. O thou who the babes of these eyes hast fled, thou art homed in heart that shall never stray. Would heaven, I would, hast thou kept our pact, long as stream shall flow to have firmest fay. Or hast forgotten the weeping slave, whom groans afflict and whom griefs waylay? Ah, when severance ends, and we side by side, couch I'll blame thy rigours and chide thy pride. Now when the portress heard her second ode, she shrieked aloud and said, By Allah, 'tis right good. And laying hands on her garments, tore them as she did the first time, and fell to the ground, fainting. Thereupon the procuratrix rose and brought her a second change of clothes, after she had sprinkled water on her. She recovered and sat upright, and said to her sister, the cateress, Onwards and help me in my duty, for there remains but this song. So she said again, brought out the lute, and began to sing these verses. How long shall last, how long this rigour rife of woe? May not suffice thee all these tears thou seest flow? Our parting thus with purpose fell, thou dost prolong, is not enough to glad the heart of envious foe. Were but this lying world once true to love a heart, he had not watched the weary night in tears of woe. O pity me whom overwhelmed thy cruel will. My Lord, my King, this time some ruth to me thou show. To whom reveal my wrongs, O thou who murdered me, sad, who of broken troth the pangs must undergo. Increase wild love for thee, and frenzy hour by hour, and days of exile minute by so long, so slow. O Muslims, claims vendetta for this slave of love, whose sleep love ever wastes, whose patience love lays low. Doth law of love allow thee, O my wish, to he, lapped in another's arm, and undo me cry go? Yet in thy presence say, what joys shall I enjoy, when he I love but works my love to overthrow? When the portress heard the third song, she cried aloud, and laying hands on her garments, rent them down to the very skirt, and fell to the ground fainting a third time, again showing the scars of her scourge. Then said the three Calendars, would heaven we had never entered this house, but had rather nighted on the mounds and heaps outside the city. For verily our visit hath been troubled by sights which cut to the heart. The Caliph turned to them and asked, why so? And they made answer, our minds are sore troubled by this matter. Quoth the Caliph, are ye not of the household? And quoth they, no, nor indeed did we ever set eyes on the place till within this hour. Hereat the Caliph marvelled and rejoined, this man who sitteth by you, would he not know the secret of the matter? And so saying, he winked and made signs at the porter. So they questioned the man, but he replied, by the Almighty of Allah, in love all we are like. I am the growth of Baghdad, yet never in my born days did I darken these doors till today, and my companying with them was a curious matter. By Allah, they rejoined, we took thee for one of them, and now we see thou art one like ourselves. Then said the Caliph, we be 7 men, and they only 3 women, without even a 4th to help them. So let us question them of their case, and if they answer us not, fain we will be answered by force. All of them agreed to this, except Jafar, who said, this is not my recking. Let them be, for we are their guests, and as ye know, they made a compact and condition with us, which we accepted and promised to keep. Wherefore it is better that we be silent concerning this matter, and as but little of the night remaineth, let each and every of us gang his own gait. Then he winked at the Caliph and whispered to him, there is but 1 hour of darkness left, and I can bring them thee tomorrow, when thou canst freely question them all concerning their story. But the Caliph raised his head haughtily and cried out at him in wrath, saying, I have no patience left for my longing to hear of them. Let the Calendars question them forthright. Quoth Jafar, this is not my rede. Then words ran high and talk answered talk, and they disputed as to who should first put the question, but at last all fixed upon the porter. And as the jangle increased, the house mistress could not but notice it, and asked them, O ye folk, on what matter are you talking so loudly? Then the porter stood up respectfully before her and said, O my lady, this company earnestly desire that thou acquaint them with the story of the 2 bitches, and what maketh thee punish them so cruelly. And then thou fallest to weeping over them and kissing them. And lastly, they want to hear the tale of thy sister, and why she hath been basinated with palm sticks like a man. These are the questions they charge me to put, and peace be with thee. Thereupon quoth she who was the lady of the house to the guests, Is this true that he saith on your part? And all replied, Yes. save Jafar, who kept his silence. When she heard these words, she cried, "By Allah, ye have wronged us, O our guests, with grievous wronggoing. For when you came before us, we made compact and condition with you, that whoso should speak of what concerneth him not, should hear what pleaseth him not. Sufficeth you not that we took you into our house and fed you with our best food? But the fault is not so much yours as hers who let you in." Then she tucked up her sleeves from her wrists and struck the floor thrice with her hand, crying, "Come ye quickly." And lo, a closet door opened, and out of it came 7 African slaves with drawn swords in hand, to whom she said, "Pinion me those praetors' elbows, and bind them each to each." They did her bidding and asked her, "O veiled and virtuous, is it thy high command that we strike off the heads?" But she answered, "Leave them a while, that I question them of their condition before their necks feel the sword." "By Allah, O my lady," cried the porter, "slay me not for other sin. All these men offended and deserve the penalty of crime, save myself. Now by Allah, our night had been charming, had we escaped the mortification of those monocular calendars, whose entrance into a populous city would convert it into a howling wilderness." Then he repeated these verses: "How fair is Ruth, the strong man deigns not smother, and fairest fair when shown the weakest brother. By love's own holy tie between us twain, let one not suffer for the sin of other." When the porter ended his verse, the lady laughed. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased to say her permitted say. And this is where I'm going to close the chapter. I hope you enjoyed this very intense story. Joanna will pick up tomorrow evening at 9:45 p.m. Vienna time. As usual, have a wonderful night. Go inwards instead of outwards. I know it is difficult sometimes, but it works. So, greetings from me and Button the cat. I'll see you the day after tomorrow. Good night all, and thanks for joining.